The Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball Players Association is currently in a lockout. And today is Monday. Today was a deadline that the MLB and the owners set for saying if there's not a deal done, they're going to start canceling regular season games. They've already gotten into canceling some spring training games. And as of now, as of 6:49 p.m. on Monday night, there is no deal. There is currently no deal. They're still meeting in Florida. I think it's Jupiter, Florida, and they're trying to talk it out. So basically, if you don't know what's going on with the MLB lockout, here's a little quick synopsis. A really great article from Jeff Passan of ESPN. He posted earlier today. Very, very interesting. One quote that stood out to me is quote, player pay has decreased for 4 consecutive years. Even as industry revenues grow and franchise value soared, and the would-be stewards of the game pleaded to anyone who would listen that owning a baseball team isn't a particularly profitable venture. Players' service time has been manipulated to keep them from free agency and salary arbitration. The luxury tax instituted to discourage runaway spending has morphed into a de facto salary cap, and too many teams are nowhere near it anyway, instead gutting their rosters and slashing their payrolls because the game's rules incentivize losing. The commissioner has called the World Series trophy a, quote, piece of metal, and the league has awarded the team that did the best job curtailing arbitration salaries a replica championship belt, end quote. The MLB lockout started on December 2nd because the MLB put a lock on everything, not the MLB Players Association. The MLB, the people who started the lockout, didn't present an argument or a what do you call it, Pat?
Solution?
Yeah, sure. A solution. Didn't present a solution to the players union until 43 days
proposal.
Later.
Right.
A proposal.
An offer. Right.
Yes, an offer. Thank you, Mark. A lot of stuff going down, but basically the research that I've done is that this is an MLB and Rob Manfred problem. They don't want a solution. They want to cause problems. The players want to play. They want to play because that's how they get paid, but also they're young players. They're exciting players. They're trying to grow the game of baseball. And it feels as though to the fans and to the people who care about baseball and to the players that the MLB and the owners don't want that. They're worried about a bottom line, and that's all they're worried about. And they're not worried about the game. Anybody? No. I have a couple more notes, but we can continue.
No, let me jump in here.
Yes,
it makes
go.
me think of, so I'm a Braves fan on the periphery, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not paying attention day to day. I'm just not.
Yeah.
But recently, the owner of the Braves, Liberty Media, released earnings showing them making bukus of money, more season ticket sales than they've had since like 2000 or something crazy like that. Revenue out the building. And at the same time, they're hung up in contract negotiations with star first baseman Freddie Freeman over whether or not to include a 6th year versus a 5-year contract.
Yeah.
This guy is the best player on the team. They're making more money than they've ever made, and they're trying to stiff him. To me, that's a microcosm of what the owners and Rob Manfred are doing and willing to do to all of the players in this negotiation. You can tell that they don't care about having baseball ready to play. That's not their concern.
Yeah. No,
they're just going to strong arm the players until they get the kind of deal that they want. Concessions be damned.
Me, Mark, and Ryan, maybe Matt and Pat were around for this as well, but off air, we've had the conversation before about, is baseball dying? Is it a dying sport? And after the pandemic, this past year for baseball was one of the best years they've ever had, whether it be revenues, whether it be viewership, whether it be social interaction, engagement, fan engagement, whatever. You have superstars. Not only you have them in big markets where people pay attention, all of this stuff. And it feels as though the owners are doing everything they can to kill this game. And it makes zero sense to me. It makes no sense. They're causing all sorts of problems that don't need to be caused. One of the biggest sticking points is expanding the playoffs. The owners want 14 teams in the playoffs. The players countered with 12. It's a current 10-team format. The players countered with 12, and the owners will not budge. It's insanity. Baseball, a sport with no salary cap as of now. Technically no salary cap. They have something called the competitive balance tax, which taxes teams for going over a $210 million threshold in their salaries. Players want the penalties for going over that to be decreased, saving the owners money for putting a winning product on the field, while also increasing the number to around 245 million for your roster. MLB cites that as a competitive disadvantage, which is insanity. I don't understand how we're at this point. They're trying to kill baseball, and baseball's not dying, but they're sure as hell trying to make it die. I'm done.
Mason, I think that brings up a good point. I know nothing about baseball, so I'm not going to probably talk about all of this piece, but do you think a longer conversation, a more interesting conversation that we can have is how has COVID affected sports in general? Because I think it's interesting to hear everyone talk about after COVID, viewership has fallen on everything. You talk about, the Oscars, the Grammys, any kind of pop culture thing, but sports, they've actually risen. Like, why is that? What is the purpose of that? What is happening to, America that we're all conveying around like sports through this global pandemic? So we don't have to have that conversation now, but I think it is something interesting to see because I had no idea that baseball was doing well after COVID. I had no clue. I mean, it's always the playoffs that people are watching, but I have really no interest in baseball, but it's good to see that a lot of people do. I think that's just a larger conversation to have around, how has this pandemic affected what we watch and how we watch it?
Yeah. Listen, again, I grew up in Oklahoma. The only thing we have to baseball is the LA Dodgers farm team, the Oklahoma City Dodgers. Yeah. That's it. Not a whole lot, but I do have two things. And one specifically tailored to Mark, and maybe Mason can hop in here as well. You said Freddie Freeman was the best player. Are we just discounting Ronald Acuna Jr., who tore his ACL? Don't you think he's way more worth paying than old man Freddie the Freeman? And that's just a question towards you, Mark. I don't know how much you know about the whole Braves roster.
He tore his ACL, and then the Braves won the championship, right?
Yeah, but Ronald Acuna Jr.
Cool. Okay, yeah.
Longer term perspective.
I'm good.
I'm just saying.
I'm good. I
get it.
Get Ronnie his ring, and then like we're good. But still pay Freddie Freeman
for old man Freddie Freeman, huh?
Oh man,
nah, he's kind of a face of the franchise, and your longevity in baseball, especially at the first base position, is so much longer than a 39-year-old baseball player, 38-year-old baseball player in the majors isn't an anomaly like Tom Brady is.
Bro, sign him to a 10-year deal. Everyone gets a DH now. Let him be a DH in the last 3 years of that deal. Doesn't matter.
You're right. The last thing I got, I'll end the talk with this. Passon also had a quote in there that he ended the article with. The MLB saw franchises values exploding to the point that in 2021, Forbes estimated the 30 MLB teams were worth a combined $55.28 billion. 10 years ago, only two collective bargaining agreements earlier, their combined valuations were $15.68 billion. Baseball's not dying, but the owners are trying to kill it.
So my only thing to that, and I know I said I had 2 points. So my first point was to Mark. I was just wanting to test his knowledge. I really just
wanted to mess with him. Yeah.
I was just trying to stir the pot because I have no idea about baseball. But
we know.
My second point, thank you, Mark. My second point, which is kind of what you're talking about, don't we think baseball is probably a top-heavy sport? Like the top team, like probably the top, 10 teams probably make up the majority of that balance or that value, I would think. I mean, we're talking the Yankees, Red Sox, the Dodgers, any of the California teams probably make up I don't know. I don't know what the number would be, but probably make up the majority of that $55 billion value is what I would think. I would think it'd be more of a top heavy sport. It's not a all 30 teams. I mean, I've seen the attendance on some of those games, like the Marlins games. I don't think there's anyone ever going to a Marlins game. So I feel like it's more a top heavy sport for sure.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And the Detroit Pistons aren't the LA Lakers. I mean, that's just the Cleveland Cavaliers aren't the Boston Celtics. You know, you can say that about a lot of things. Baseball, I get it because there's 162 games and the empty stands. You have 81 opportunities for fans to come out and see, and the empty seats. You're right, 100%, Matt, are a lot more glaring with those lower income teams. But that's what they're trying to fix with this tax threshold. You're rewarded for being terrible. They're trying to introduce a lottery system for draft picks like the NBA does. So you can't suck and be rewarded. Tanking, I should say.
Yeah.
Mark, did you have anything? You look like you were about to add something.
Yeah. So I think like you compared it to NBA teams, and I've just been sitting here stewing on this idea that all of these labor negotiations are kind of the same. They all kind of go the same. The NBA has had a couple of situations like this dating back to like 2011, since we can, really pay attention to it, right?
Yeah.
And it always seems to go like the players propose an offer that seems pretty reasonable, and then the owners come back with something that's not. And then they go back and forth 2 or 3 times and they land on something much closer to the owner's offer than the player's offer, because these owners are worth so much more and they can wait out the players so much longer.
Yeah.
They generally come up with, enough things that the players can say they won, but it's not really close. I bet we see something like that happen here.
I think you're probably right. Pat, do you have an MLB team, right?
The Stros.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. You're a Stros guy.
I only have one, just the Stros.
Name your top 5 players on the Astros.
I mean, we don't have to do that right now.
Hey, Mace, I did look up MLB valuations for all teams because I thought Matt brought up a good point on top heavy.
Yeah.
It's not as top heavy as I thought it was, but New York Yankees, obviously $5.25 billion. Los Angeles Dodgers, $3.57 billion. Boston Red Sox, $3.46 billion. Every team other than one, the Miami Marlins, is worth more than $1 billion.
And the Miami Marlins are a joke.
We saw what happened.
They tore down the Orange Bowl to build that atrocity of a stadium down there in South Florida. Morons.